Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The 5 conservative members of the Supreme Court appear poised to allow the Trump administration to add a controversial question on citizenship to the 2020 census. It's controversial partly because, as Justice Sonia Sotomayor said during today's oral arguments, quote, "There's no doubt that people will respond less because of the census. That has been proven in study after study. The people who respond less to that question are non-citizens. And when people respond less, it skews things like congressional representation and federal funding for the next decade. And the question is this: is suppressing that response from immigrants the very reason that Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross added the question to begin with? Ross claimed that the Department of Justice asked him to include the question. But as the Washington Post reports, emails and depositions in the lawsuit showed Ross had discussed the issue with White House officials urging a crackdown on undocumented immigrants. Some show that he initiated contact with the Justice Department officials, not the other way around. For some reason, Chief Justice John Roberts and the other conservative justices seem to move past why 3 federal district court judges had banned the Trump Commerce Department from adding the question and seized on a pretty shocking and cynical justification to keep it. Reuters reports, quote, Roberts told New York Solicitor General Barbara Underwood, whose state sued to block the question, that citizenship data is critical for enforcing the Voting Rights Act. You'll recall that in 2013, Roberts voted to gut a key portion of the Voting Rights Act, calling it unnecessary to pre-clear southern states because racism is over. And as Ari Berman wrote in 2015, John Roberts' legal career has been a decades-long crusade against the Voting Rights Act. So the idea that he would invoke it as a reason to twist the census to Donald Trump's anti-immigration aims is interesting. And if the Supreme Court does allow the citizenship question to remain, there's little question that the voting rights of many Americans will be undermined. Joining me now are 2 people who were at the oral arguments today. Dale Ho, director of the ACLU's Voting Rights Project, who argued against adding the citizen question in front of the Supreme Court today, and Vanita Gupta, president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and former head of the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Thank you both for being here. And Dale, I'll start with you. How surprising was it to hear John Roberts voice the idea that the reason to add a citizenship question was to strengthen the Voting Rights Act?
Well, it wasn't all that surprising. The government has been saying from the beginning that that's the reason why they added this question. But as you noted, they were intent on adding it long before anyone ever suggested the idea that it might be helpful for purposes of the Voting Rights Act. And let's be real for a second here. The Voting Rights Act is not a priority of this administration. They haven't brought a single lawsuit to enforce the Voting Rights Act. So the notion that they wanted to change the census to help enforce voting rights is really ludicrous.
Yeah, and you also, in your oral argument, hit back at their claim that they wanted to do this because it makes things more accurate. Please explain.
Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, the Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, when he said we needed to add this question, he said that it wouldn't harm census responses. That was false. The Census Bureau predicted that 6.5 million people won't respond to the census. And what that means is the data is less accurate. So when they say that, oh, we need this data for the Voting Rights Act, well, you're going to have a much less accurate census when 6.5 million people don't respond to it. It's going to harm efforts to protect voting rights rather than help them.
Yeah, and Vanita, let me just read you a little bit from a Washington Post piece today that talks about the potential undercount should this citizenship question be added. Experts calculated that adding the question could mean an undercount of as many as 6.5 million people and cause special harm to urban areas and states with large immigrant populations. California, for instance, worried it could lose as many as 3 congressional seats. Do you suspect that that's what this is about, stripping congressional seats and representation from blue states with large immigrant populations?
Yeah, I do. I think that, first of all, I want to say that Dale did a phenomenal job this morning in the Supreme Court. But the nefarious agenda behind the addition of this question has really been revealed through the litigation that led up to the Supreme Court argument today. There's little hiding the fact that Wilbur Ross was communicating with Steve Bannon and Chris Kobach in the early days of the administration to add this question, and this back-end rationale allegedly that the Trump Justice Department under Jeff Sessions needed the census citizenship data in order to robustly enforce the Voting Rights Act was so blatantly a ruse. But the underlying thing, look, every aspect of this administration has been virulently anti-immigrant, and the Steve Bannon and Chris Kobachs of the world want to change how redistricting happens and how district and reapportionment happens. They want only citizens to be counted in that process. And the census, though, is written into the Constitution. The Constitution makes very clear that the federal government has a duty every 10 years to count every single person in this country. Not every citizen in this country, but every single person in this country. And the fact that study after study shows that the addition of this question is going to undermine the accuracy of the count, and yet that justices seemed, and even the Justice Department is conceding that fact, is actually kind of striking, and is a signal of where we are today around the politicization of these issues and of core tenets of our democracy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying that when the Constitution was written, the enslaved African African population were not considered citizens. They were 3/4 of a person. They weren't even considered people. Dale Ho, is there any recourse? Let's say this goes through, because I think the pessimistic out there believe that the 5 conservatives are going to allow the Trump administration to add a citizenship question. What then?
Well, I just want to hold things up on that prognostication here, because people who try to read the tea leaves of the Supreme Court are frequently wrong. And, some people thought the Affordable Care Act would get struck down, and that didn't happen. And I just think it's a little early to say something like that. The evidence in this case is really strong that adding this question is going to wreck the census, which is a pillar of our constitutional structure. And I have to think that if the justices care about the evidence, they're going to listen to that. Now, as you know, we might not win, right? That's the case every time we go in front of the Supreme Court. And what we have to do is just double down on our efforts to make sure that everyone gets counted. You hear sometimes people talking about how, well, we just might not respond to the census if this question's on there. That is the worst thing that we can do right now, because that's exactly what Steve Bannon and Chris Kobach want. They want an undercount of communities of color. They want our communities to receive fewer political representatives and less resources, and we can't let them win.
It is Wednesday, the 24th of April of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this priest? And do it with a really nice egg dish with a wonderful velvety hollandaise sauce. It's the only way. It really is. Well. The argument really is that Wilbur Ross and all the rest, all the way up to Roberts with this census plan, putting in a citizenship question that will result in less people filling out the census, and then will result in really democratic areas having less money to be able to do the work the government's supposed to do. It's all a plan, folks. But now, look, Trump and Roberts and the rest are truly defending the Voting Rights Act. You know, the gutted Voting Rights Act that Roberts gutted? Yeah. So they're not lying. They're tricky, but they're not lying. So we have that going for us. Boy, that would kind of be a drag, to put it in surfer lingo. You don't want to keep people from filling out the census. You need an accurate count. And I can just see Stephen Miller. He's just smirking because he covered all the bases. You know, everything that is an argument for the census, he is using as an argument against the census. I've already been hit by, I wouldn't say the usual trolls, because that means it would denote specific individuals. I don't mean that. I mean the act of trolling. I've been hit by the usual trolling. And the citizenship question really got people, well, at least the trolls, the bots, really upset. A lot of military types, too. They were all ready to flaunt their military know-how as if they're some sort of, I don't know, above the law. They're gods, and the rules don't apply to them. The ideas of what patriotism means and what it means to fight for the flag and America and its ideals seem to be totally lost on these fellows, and they're all fellows, by the way. And I might say of a certain age. But they could be bots, too, so we have to take that into consideration. But regardless, the usual arguments of bigotry and racism and third world invasions. Okay. Well, you know, if they spent a little bit more time reading the Federalist Papers instead of some right-wing Nazi tract. Oh, boy. You know, if I was Poet Philosopher King and I was running the show, I would make sure that my military read the Federalist Papers. And also Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptists. I mean, come on. And I would keep, the Elders of Zion and the Turner Diaries out of their hands. They cannot read those, and I could only get away with it because I'm Poet Philosopher King. Otherwise, I guess they have their rights to be able to read the Turner Diaries and the Elders of Zion. But in the military, I mean, come on, they tell you how to square off your corners. Jeez. You didn't have your elbow at the right angle when you brought your fork to your mouth in the mess. Okay. So, a lot of supposed military types who seem very unpatriotic and totally lost on them. Why this is the other thing, they gave up their lives for 4 years for Uncle Sam. Really? Gave up your lives like it was some sort of chore? Your patriotic duty? Wow. Okay, fine. I don't know. When I was providing service to my country as much as I could because, well, I had a certain luck, shall we say, and also the luck of being heavily injured from playing sports, and they wouldn't take me even when I tried. So, yeah, I put myself out for the draft, and the luck of the lottery meant that, But we were encouraged to give service to this nation in any way possible. You join the Peace Corps. You do what you need to do. Volunteer at the local convalescent hospital. Volunteer. So, unlike these fellows who gave up 4 years of their lives for Uncle Sam, look, as far as I'm concerned, they got 3 squares a day, some pretty nice clothes, too, and lodging. When I volunteered, they didn't give me any of that stuff. Nope. Yeah, you didn't get a uniform allowance. You went and bought your own uniforms, whatever they might be. Orderly uniform. Well, it's not that much money, but still, they didn't provide them. You went to the medical supply company and you bought them. You didn't stand in line and they look at you and hand you a outfit of clothes. Of course, we didn't have to get up at 6 or 4:30 in the morning and go on a 10-mile hike either, but I used to get up around that time and do it just for fun. Except I was running, not hiking. Wow, is it all about me? I just hate the kind of trolling that gloms onto the military as if that is supposed to give them some sort of purity, and you can't argue against them. It's bullshit. Read the Federalist Papers and Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptists. Every military person should be required to read that. Every single one. What is this, America or something else? Well, they're trying to turn it into something else. Indeed. Wow, I'm going off. It's Wednesday. That was a long clip at the front. I got to get on to what else we're doing. And there's so much going on in the world right now. As usual, I just had to put a stop to it so that we could curate this show. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, Trump has installed more white judges than any president in 25 years. Gone out of his way, too. I read somewhere that Stephen Miller has Trump, his private parts in a bag somewhere. It might be. Another 6 Trump appointees are under investigation at just one agency. And Purple Heart vet Mom MJ Hegar takes on McConnell's top lackey John Cornyn in the Texas U.S. Senate race. And Cornyn's running scared. He's going after Patton Oswalt. He's bringing up Patton Oswalt tweets from like 5 years ago. Really adolescent, sophomoric stuff. It really cracks me up. John Cornyn's scared. Yeah, he's acting scared. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where the new Irish Republican Army apologized for the killing of Irish journalist Lyra McKee, its first acknowledgement that one of its members was involved. And the NASA probe InSight detected a marsquake, marking the first time a seismological temblor has been recorded on another planet. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Do go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page down there is the chat room link, so do engage there. Kelly Lincoln monitors that. To the leftish of the page, from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the contribute link button. Become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. If you could afford even just one latte espresso type coffee drink a month, that goes a long way to helping Resistance Radio resist as the founders originally intended. And it really does help pay our bills. Really how we keep this powerhouse of resistance going is what comes out of our own wallets, and you are our biggest contributor. And we would really, truly be unable to do it without you. So thank you for your generosity. Become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. And the deities will smile blessedly upon your countenance. It is the time of renewal now, isn't it? Okay, if you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we are so forever grateful that he does. I take care of at Justice Putnam on Twitter, and I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get the social media linked up right in that 10-minute window, or a little bit smidgen into the opening segment of the show. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and, of course, pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeart, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found among the billions of podcasts out there. Are there billions? Could be. You never know. What's a podcast anymore? All right, let's get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, by the way. I'm not anti-Catholic. I was baptized a Catholic. And once you're baptized a Catholic, it's like being in the mafia. You never get away. It's like an oath of omerta. And you can, take on other spiritual practices, but you'll always have the original poison of Catholicism. So when I talk about Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, I'm not making some sort of veiled threat about Catholicism. I'm speaking simply about a velvety hollandaise on a wonderful, wonderful egg dish. And, getting rid of some troublesome priests, too, because, look, no one is above the law. No one. The great Oliver Willis from Share Blue Media brings us this first offering here. Trump is packing the courts with white men like him because can you imagine a world where we all have to be made over into Trump's image? Oh, God. There's a lot of white guys who are already like that. They got a leg up and a gut, too. Trump is reshaping the American courts for decades to come and turning back the clock on diversity by nominating more white judges than any president in the last 25 years. 92% of Trump nominees who have been confirmed to U.S. district courts and 90% of Trump's circuit court judges have been white. Trump also did not confirm a single black or Latino judge to the circuit court, and his district court judges were only 2% black and 2% Latino. Well. Trump has also put a thumb on the scale in terms of gender. 89% of his confirmed circuit court judges and 74 of his district court judges were men. And there's even less now that his sister had to step down because she's caught up in a fraud tax scheme that Donnie Two Scoops, by all evidence, began. Funny how that worked. The last time the field of judicial nominees was as white as Trump's was during the presidency of George H.W. Bush from 1989 to 1993. The guy who won because of Willie Horton. Racially charged, they said at the time. President Barack Obama's judicial nominees were historically diverse, a trend that Trump is now drastically reversing because everything Obama did has to be undone. We're the new Egyptians, and we're going to obliterate every bit of evidence that you ever existed. Take that pillar there, for instance. It says Trump now, doesn't it? Yeah, Ozymandias. Look at the lone and level sands as they stretch far and wide. Martin of Share Blue Media brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Interior Department's Inspector General confirmed that 6 Trump appointees at the agency are under investigation for breaking federal ethics rules about engaging with their former employers or clients on official matters related to their previous jobs, because this is the grifter administration. And they can just ignore every subpoena now. The law, that's for little people. The 6 high-ranking officials joined the department's brand new secretary, David Barnhart, who was in his role for all of 4 days before he was slapped with an investigation over his conflicts of interest and other potential ethics violations. Of course, I failed to mention that these 6 are alleged, but we know that truly they violated it because, hey, what's the law anymore is what you say it is. Okay, and we say that the rule of law is what we've had established and continue to evolve over time to make it more fair for, I would want to say more people, but we want to say everyone. Thank you. The newest investigation came about after the Campaign Legal Center brought a complaint to the IG's office about the conduct of the officials. Taken together, the conduct suggests, quote, a disturbing pattern of misconduct across the Department of the Interior, end quote. And that's in the complaint. The 6 officials named are, cool, here comes the shaming, Assistant Secretary for Insular and International Affairs, Doug Domenech. Oh, Meghan McCain's hubby. No wonder she's been getting so, shall we say, testy. White House Liaison Lori Mashburn, Deputy Director of the Office of Intergovernmental and External Affairs Timothy Williams, Director of the Office of Intergovernmental and External Affairs Todd Wynn, Senior Deputy Director of Intergovernmental and External Affairs Benjamin Cassidy, and former counselor to the Secretary for Energy Policy, Vincent DeVito. Each official was required to sign an ethics pledge at the beginning of their tenure with the Trump administration. The pledge forbids them from working on matters involving former employers or clients and prevents the appointee from taking official meetings or communicating with those former employers or clients. But the pledge apparently did not stop these appointees because, in this reporter's opinion, they signed a non-disclosure agreement with the President of the United States, who happens to be Donald Trump, and he demands tribute, and the way you get tribute is by hitting up your former employers. You give it to Trump, and then he'll parcel up the franchises for everybody to have. The culture of corruption exhibited by this group mirrors much of the Trump administration. Scandals have resulted in a number of high-profile Trump administration resignations, including Tom Price, Ryan Zinke, Barack Long, David Shulkin, Scott Pruitt, and many, many others, too numerous to list here. Of course, the unethical behavior starts at the top with Trump himself. The redacted Mueller report released last week lists a number of ways Trump tried to obstruct justice over the course of the past 2 years and make a bunch of money doing it, by the way. And given the level of corruption in the Trump administration, these 6 Interior Department appointees seem to fit right in, and they were just trying to make some money to kick up to the big boss. Why is that illegal? Emily Singer, also of Share Blue Media, brings us this final offering here on the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The Texas 2020 Senate race is gearing up to be a blockbuster contest now that Democrat MJ Hegar, an Air Force helicopter pilot who won a Purple Heart for her service, has announced she's entering the race to take on incumbent GOP Senator John Cornyn. You know, the guy that Beto was too afraid to run against. Hegar made her announcement in a video that lays out her reasoning for entering the Senate race. Washington still has a lot of listening to do, and I'm going to make sure they hear us, Hegar says in the ad. Texans deserve a senator who represents our values, strength, courage, independence, putting Texans first. Hegar's new ad also reminds voters of the viral ad that ran as part of her bid for a Texas House seat in 2018, which drew national attention for the engaging story it told about Hegar's military service and her fight to open doors for women in the military. Republicans were already girding for a fight. Even Cornyn, who as majority whip serves as Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's number 2, admitted that his reelection could be in trouble. But Hegar's entrance raises the stakes. She's a top Democratic recruit in the rapidly changing Lone Star State. When Hegar ran for Congress in 2018, she nearly defeated a longtime Republican incumbent in a district that Trump carried by 13 points in 2016. The statewide margins in Texas were closer than that in 2016, when Trump defeated Hillary Clinton by 9 points. And Democrat Beto O'Rourke nearly won his Senate race against Ted Cruz in 2018. Hegar says that unlike Cornyn, she will protect people with pre-existing conditions and fight the Senate gridlock that McConnell has orchestrated, and he's already come out and said, I'm blocking everything, because he's got a lot of rubles and I think a lot of yen to make him, toe the line. For those of you who don't know Senator John Cornyn, Hegar says, he's that tall guy lurching behind Mitch McConnell in basically every single video. He calls himself Big John, but he shrinks out of the way while Mitch McConnell gets in the way of anything actually getting done in our government. Democrats have not won a Senate seat in Texas since 1988, but Hegar is a serious contender who has a shot at breaking that streak in 2020, more than 30 years later. Indeed. Let's get to our break, and when we come back from that break, we're going to go through weather from around the world, and we're going to go through and finish up the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, DC does superhero comedy. The DC universe has a reputation for being dark. From Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins to Patty Jenkins' smash Wonder Woman, few think of DC as light fare. Therefore, it is a bit of a welcome surprise that David F. Sandberg's Shazam is surprisingly funny, despite dealing with fairly serious issues, including child abandonment, family loss, and even the personification of the 7 deadly sins. Simply put, Shazam tells the tale of Billy Batson, a Pennsylvania teen on a journey to find his long-lost mother, who along the way meets a wizard who gives him an array of superpowers. Billy learns that by saying the word Shazam, he can transform himself into an adult superhero. The entire premise of the film is kind of like Big Meets Superman, but that isn't a bad thing. In fact, it actually works well. Aided by his foster brother Freddie, played by an excellent Jack Dylan Grazer, Billy actually learns how to be a superhero, as we see him go from using his powers for laughs, and quite incompetently, to plot advancing good. Simultaneously, and in some of the best scenes, we witness the physically grown-up Shazam learn to be an adult. Throw in a villain with daddy issues, played by British character actor Mark Strong, and Shazam is an entertaining movie that doesn't drag or lose its pace, although some tighter editing in the later chapters would have helped. While the ending may wrap up a bit neatly for some, and the emphasis on the importance of Billy's diverse foster family is a little heavy-handed at times, Shazam remembers a lot of what superhero movies are supposed to be about. It'll likely be eclipsed by the release of the upcoming Avengers movie, but you'll leave the theater having witnessed the birth of a promising franchise for DC. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Annie Sneed.
It takes a big brain, a human brain, to do math. Or so you might assume. But scientists have found that other animals, such as chimpanzees, monkeys, and even pigeons, can perform some addition and subtraction. Now, new research shows that the honeybee, with a brain the size of a sesame seed, can perform basic math. Researchers put honeybees through 100 trials to try to train them to add and subtract. They put the bees in a Y-shaped maze and presented them with a certain number of either yellow or blue shapes. Yellow indicated the bee should subtract, while blue meant they should add. The bee then entered the decision chamber, where it was presented with a correct answer on one side and an incorrect answer on the other side. If they picked the right answer, they were rewarded with the sugary solution. If not, they got bitter tonic water. The researchers also put the bees through another test trial, without a reward or punishment, to make sure there weren't any scent marks influencing the bees' choices. At first, the bees picked answers at random.
And you see that the ability of the bees to do it starts at about chance level, which is 50%, showing us that bees are just choosing randomly. But over time, their competence comes up to about 80%, I think. So they actually start to perform quite well.
Scarlett Howard, one of the study authors and a postdoctoral research fellow in neurobiology and cognition at Paul Sabatier University in France. She says the bees were even able to add and subtract correctly when presented with a number they had never seen before. The study is in the journal Science Advances.
Things like this can let us know that there's a lot of complexity there and that their brains might not be as simplistic as we once thought.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Annie Sneed.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2013, the day of the deadliest workplace disaster in garment industry history. More than 1,100 workers lost their lives when a factory complex building collapsed in Bangladesh. More than 2,500 workers were injured. The day before the collapse, workers had noticed cracks in the building. A bank and shops on the lower floor did not open the next day, fearful the structure was unstable. The garment workers were ordered back to work under the threat of being fired. Rescue efforts continued continued for nearly 3 weeks. One woman was found alive after 17 days. She was a seamstress. Bangladesh's garment industry is the second largest in the world, ranking only behind China. Nearly half of the top brands in the United States are produced in Bangladesh. The workers there are amongst the lowest paid in the world. Legal restrictions make trade union organizing in the country very difficult. A later investigation found that the building was built without authorization on a pond and converted from commercial to industrial use. It was also discovered the owners had cut corners and used substandard materials in the constructing of the building. In addition, the owners added 3 more floors than were originally included in the building permit. In the aftermath of the disaster, more than 150 clothing companies signed a workers' safety accord. Most of these were European companies. This plan was backed by Bangladeshi unions. Some large U.S. chains such as Walmart and Gap refused to sign, saying that they had their own safety plans. It's important to note that the result of inspections under the Walmart-backed plan were not legally binding. After the 2013 disaster, it was estimated that it would take $3 billion to make the garment factories in the country safe. Today, Bangladesh has more than 4,000 garment factories, and many of them remain dangerous places to work. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
One of Donald Trump's favorite lines of attack these days is calling congressional Democrats obstructionists. This is just one example of how his administration gaslights America. In actuality, the Democrats are getting work done. The Republicans are being told not to cooperate on any front. On Tuesday, 2 White House officials said the administration plans to fight a subpoena issued by the House Judiciary Committee for former White House counsel Don McGahn. McGahn was mentioned more than 150 times in the Mueller report and provided damaging accounts to investigators about how the president pressured him to oust the special counsel and then pushed him to publicly deny the episode. Separately, the administration directed a former White House official not to comply with a subpoena from the House Oversight Committee, prompting the panel to move to hold him in contempt of Congress. Carl Klein was in charge of the security clearance process and now works for the Defense Department. In a statement, Oversight Committee Chairman Elijah Cummings said, "The White House and Mr. Klein now stand in open defiance of a duly authorized congressional subpoena with no assertion of any privilege of any kind by President Trump. Based on these actions, it appears that the president believes that the Constitution does not apply to his White House." And if that weren't enough, the Treasury Department missed a second deadline Tuesday to turn over 6 years of Donald Trump's tax returns. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said that he planned to make a final decision as to whether to furnish Trump's tax returns by May 6th, marking the first time he's committed to reaching a final decision. So the New York Times' Robert Costa was reporting on that story about the White House stonewalling Congress when he got a phone call from Donald Trump himself. Costa told Rachel Maddow all about it Tuesday night.
The president not only is telling you that he intends to try to block everybody who's worked in the Trump White House from testifying to Congress, he's telling you that he believes he's on strong legal ground to do that?
And he's also making a political argument, and that was what came through in the conversation with President Trump tonight. He believes he has won a political victory with the Mueller report, and now he wants to kick the battle to the federal courts if Congress tries to pursue their subpoena requests with people like Don McGahn, as you've outlined. And he believes that he can say he's cooperated with Mueller and the American people will follow along. But Congress and House Democrats will continue to fight and demand for these officials to testify.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell seems to have gotten the message. On Tuesday, McConnell said, quote, "If I'm still the majority leader in the Senate, think of me as the Grim Reaper. None of that stuff is going to pass." He pledged that even if Republicans lose the White House, he would use his position as majority leader, if they hold on to the Senate, to block progressive proposals like the Green New Deal. Republicans are defending 22 Senate seats next year, including McConnell's, compared to the 12 seats being defended by Democrats. Vote. The Supreme Court appears poised to uphold the Trump administration's directive to ask about citizenship on the 2020 census. The court heard the case on Tuesday, and the conservative majority appeared to be in agreement with the policy, while the liberal justices are opposed. The question could greatly affect congressional representation for states with large numbers of immigrants, including California and New York, which tend to vote Democratic. It could also affect the share of federal dollars given to states over the next 10 years and the 2024 presidential election. 3 lower courts have blocked the plan, ruling that the question would violate the provision in the Constitution that calls for a count of the population, regardless of citizenship status. Jared Kushner stepped in it again. During an interview at the Time 100 summit, the president's son-in-law called the Mueller probe nonsense and downplayed Russia's interference in the 2016 elections.
You look at, what Russia did, buying some Facebook ads to try to sow dissent and do it, and it's a terrible thing. But I think the investigations and all of the speculation that's happened for the last 2 years has had a much harsher impact on our democracy than a couple of Facebook ads.
Well, that didn't go over well. I could have played the reaction from any news outlet, but thought it more poignant coming from Fox. So here's their actual journalist, Shepard Smith.
Jared Kushner's diminishment of Russian interference is both disingenuous and deceptive. The attack on our democracy involved much more than the purchase of a few Facebook ads. From the Mueller report, we now know Russians made contact with multiple members of the Trump campaign, including Jared Kushner, attempting to change American policies and promote Russian objectives. They repeatedly received campaign polling data from a member of the Trump team. They discussed possible business deals, policy goals, and getting dirt on Hillary Clinton with the now president's son and others. They conducted cyber espionage, stealing emails and distributing them to help candidate Trump and hurt Trump's opponent. They sent Russian operatives to America in person to learn the landscape and generally sow division in America. They broke into state and local election computers. They invaded our nation in both the cyber and physical worlds. The United States indicted 26 Russian nationals and 3 Russian companies, and the Mueller report makes crystal clear, and all U.S. intelligence agencies concur, the Russians are still trying to damage our nation, interfere in our affairs, and influence our elections.
And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, along the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 62 degrees. We're expected a high of, upper 70s, could be the low 80s. Overnight lows in the mid-50s. And tomorrow we're going to have a daytime high of, about 82. So I would say low to mid-80s tomorrow, with an overnight low of the low 50s. Well, how dare you? And right now, winds are out of the due south, a negligible 1 to 2 miles per hour. We're experiencing cloudy conditions, though we're supposed to be mostly sunny today. And we're going to have all sun tomorrow. So that'll be nice. Looks like rain is back in the offing come early next week. We'll see how that holds up. There are some things brewing offshore and also inland as the confluence of warm and cold, moisture and dry comes together. All right, so let's see. Grass pollen is high. The air quality index actually has gone down to 12 parts per million in the good range, though that daytime UV index remains high at 7. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.93 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles. And relative humidity, though, is at 75%. And that's a lot drier than we've had. Though it doesn't seem so dry when I went out to turn off the mister for one of the gardens. Well, there you go. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 64 and partly cloudy. Paris is 63 and cloudy. Rome is 77 degrees and sunny. Kiev is 72 and fair. Kabul is 58 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 77 and clear, and they're going to jail the Occupy Democracy people because they don't want to have democracy there. There's a new sheriff in town. Really. Japan, well, it's not just Japan. Tokyo is 67 degrees with rain. Sydney, Australia is 67 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 59 degrees and sunny. And New York is 65 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny on the Big Apple. Well, that's weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Amanda Ferguson of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The new IRA militant Irish nationalist group has apologized for the killing of journalist Lyra McKee. Its first acknowledgement that one of its members was involved, the Irish News newspaper reported yesterday, Tuesday. The organization, which opposes Northern Ireland's 1998 peace deal, described McKee's death as tragic and offered, quote, full and sincere apologies, end quote, to her partner, family, and friends. And a statement the Irish News said it received on Monday night that used a recognized code. The 29-year-old reporter was shot dead in Londonderry on last Thursday as she watched Irish nationalist youths attack police following a raid. Police said McKee was hit when a gunman opened fire in the direction of officers. McKee's death, which followed a large car bomb in Londonderry in January that police also blamed on the new IRA, sparked outrage in the British-run province and raised fears that small, marginalized militant groups are trying to exploit political tensions caused by Britain's decision to leave the EU. The new IRA said it had sent members to the area after the police raid in Londonderry last week. Quote, we have instructed our volunteers to take the utmost care in future when engaging with the enemy and put in place to help ensure this, its statement said. Well, that's nice. Don't shoot at people that are between you and the cops. That's one way of doing it, I guess. The group is one of a number of small organizations that remain active and oppose the 1998 deal, which largely ended 3 decades of violence in the region. It is, of course, far smaller than the Irish Republican Army, which disarmed after the peace deal. Police said they unconditionally released a 57-year-old woman arrested earlier on Tuesday in connection with the killing. 2 men aged 18 and 19 were arrested and later released over the killing at the weekend. I wonder if they were related, Ma. I don't know. McKee's death occurred amid more than a 2-year political vacuum in the Northern Ireland area since Irish nationalist Sinn Féin withdrew from the compulsory power-sharing government with the pro-British Democratic Unionist Party. The executive is central to the 1998 deal, and Britain's Northern Ireland minister, Karen Bradley, said she plans to hold talks with party leaders in the province later this week to see what progress can be made. Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney, who has brokered the on-off negotiations between the parties, alongside Bradley, also met with politicians in Belfast earlier on Tuesday. The last set of talks ended in failure over a year ago, and attempts to break the deadlock have been complicated by poor relations between Sinn Féin and the DUP. The DUP's role in propping up Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May's minority government in London, and the impact of Brexit on Northern Ireland, which will pretty much devastate the island. Our lasting tribute to Lyra must be that to ensure that we continue to work for peace in the whole of Northern Ireland, Bradley told the British Parliament.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Joey Roulette, also of Reuters, brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. NASA's robotic probe InSight has detected and measured what scientists believe to be a marsquake, marking the first time a likely seismological temblor has been recorded on another planet, JPL in California reported. The breakthrough came nearly 5 months after InSight, the first spacecraft designed specifically to study the deep interior of a distant world, touched down on the surface of Mars to begin its 2-year seismological mission on the red planet. The faint rumble, characterized by JPL scientists as a likely Marsquake, roughly equal to a 2.5 magnitude earthquake, was recorded on April 6th, the lander's 128th Martian day, or affectionately known as a soul. As in the sun, soul. Not the soul that animates whatever it is that's supposed to be our spirit. Okay? Let's not be confused. And a 2.5 magnitude earthquake, you don't even feel that in the Bay Area, and if you do, it means you're not a local. Now, the Marsquake was detected by InSight's French-built seismometer, an instrument sensitive enough to measure a seismic wave just 1/2 the radius of a hydrogen atom. We've been collecting background noise up until now, but this first event officially kicks off a new field, Martian seismology, InSight principal investigator Bruce Bernert said in a news release. Scientists are still examining the data to conclusively determine the precise cause of the signal, but the trembling appeared to have originated from inside the planet. I think it's the tembling, not trembling, as opposed to being caused by forces above the surface, such as wind. The high-frequency level and broadband is very similar to what we get from a rupture process, so we are very confident this is a Marsquake. Philippe Longon, a geophysics and planetary science professor at University Paris Diderot in France, said, and he's also the lead researcher for InSight seismometer. Still, a temblor so faint in Southern California would be virtually lost among the dozens of small seismic crackles that occur every day. Our informed guesswork is that this is a very small event that's relatively close, maybe from 50 to 100 kilometers away, said. From the lander, Bernard told Reuters, a more distant quake would yield greater information about Mars' interior because seismic waves would penetrate deeper into the planet before they come back up to the seismometer. So they're still waiting for that radar signal in which to image how the interior of Mars really is. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you know that Netroots Radio is broadcasting on, and Trump was in another Twitter rage this morning. So something's coming down again. You know we're all going to suffer for it. He's going to try to make sure. But I think that we have the forces arrayed against that onslaught. So check in with us tomorrow. Of course, we're going to be here for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursday. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.